Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. So I have Mr. Ben Wendel here. Ben is a phenomenal saxophonist, and I just want to tell you how we met. Now, I've been following him for years. He's a great improviser, composer, jazz musician. So we were in Tokyo this summer, myself and my family, and we were staying at a hotel. It was about a mile from the Blue Note. And I was like, this is the last night we were there. I was like, I wonder who's at the Blue Note today. And I look and it's like, Ben Wendel's there. Oh my God. So I said to my son, Dylan, you want to go see this? He's like, sure. So I try to call up and get tickets, and I can't get through to buy tickets there. It was like probably 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was like, I think I've been in contact with Ben in the past. So I looked and I found Ben's phone number that was in my phone because he emailed me and I didn't return his email. I mean, I must have missed it completely. So I think I texted you.
Yeah.
And you're like, come to the show, put you on the list and everything. So I didn't want to be that guy, but you graciously invited Dylan and I to the show. And it was an incredible experience. And one of the funny things, I told Ben this story, is that he played this first song. Well, I'm actually going to play you the song. I'll just play. It's a song called January. Oh, welcome, Ben, first of all.
Rick, thank you for having me, man. Honored.
Okay, so they played this song called January. It's off his record that came out in 2018, I believe.
Yeah.
And the record is The Seasons.
Yeah.
There's a song or a tune or a composition for every season. And the first one is January, and that's the first song that you played in the set.
Yeah.
And this is how it goes. So that's the melody, or would you call it the head?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys played, the band was...
Yeah, the Tokyo band, that was the great Taylor Eichste on piano.
Yep.
The bass player, amazing Harish Raghavan on bass, and the wonderful Justin Faulkner on drums.
Okay, so this was phenomenal. This tune just blew me away. And my son Dylan's sitting across from me, and I told Ben this. Dylan's like, looks at me after it, and he said, wow, I don't like jazz, but that was amazing. And he was really blown away. Okay, so let's just kind of start with some of your background.
Sure.
You're from California, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up on the west side. I grew up in Santa Monica, and luckily Santa Monica had a great public school system, music programs starting in middle school. My mom was an opera singer and a teacher, so there was definitely music in the house. And when I was 10, I picked up the saxophone.
Playing the school band, right?
Yeah, totally. I remember the day Mr. Metler, he was like one of those teachers that could play a bit of every instrument, and he brought up the clarinet and the tuba and the trombone and the sax. And when I saw the sax, I was really drawn to it. I don't know why, but I just fell in love with that instrument and continued to play. And then I went to Santa Monica High School, and they had an amazing music program, about 3,500 kids. Their music program, as a public high school, had 900 students. So they had.
That's insane.
It was crazy. Yeah. They had 2 wind ensembles, 2 orchestras, a marching band, a jazz band. So it was kind of like a miniature,
like a college.
Yeah, kind of like a music school.
Yeah.
And they had great instruments you could rent. They had Mark Sixes and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I just kept playing. I played in every band that I could. I just absolutely fell in love with music. Eventually, the orchestra, they were missing a bassoon player. They asked if I'd learn that instrument, and I said, yeah, so. Yeah, and we were talking about our Rochester connection, so after high school, I I definitely knew I wanted to be a musician. I started auditioning for different schools. I auditioned for New England Conservatory, where you went. I also auditioned for the Eastman School of Music, which is where I settled.
Why Eastman?
At the time, I was primarily a classical sax player, actually. And luckily, my teacher at that time, there was a guy named Ray Ricker.
I know Ray Ricker.
Yeah, he kind of said, you know, Ben, this is kind of your path if you stay in this field of music, let's say. But if you really want to have a wide field of choices, then we really have to expand out. You need to learn how to improvise and all this. And God bless him, because, you know, it changed my life.
So who was part of some of the jazz professors at that time?
At that time, they just had started the bachelor's degree in jazz. And it was a really interesting mix of people. There was a guy, Fred Sturm, who was more coming from the traditional field. And then they brought in these two guys from Cal Arts, Ralph Alessi, great trumpet player, and Michael Caine, who played with Jack DeJohnette and Michel Ndegeocello, people like that. So it was a really kind of cool time. I had all of the really deep traditional training of a conservatory, you know, learning about classical music, Western harmony, and then Ralph and Mike just came from this other side, kind of this, you know, the improviser side and the philosophy behind it. So,
well, coming from Cal Arts, coming from the other side of the country, and Cal Arts was, I guess that was when Charlie Hayden still teaching there then when they were there?
Yeah, Charlie was there, and he was kind of the heart and soul of that program.
Yep.
And I think it still lives on in that way, his aesthetic, you know. I have to say, actually, one other person had a huge effect on me coming out of high school, and is still a great friend of mine, Terrace Martin, who went on to, you know, produce Kendrick Lamar. He's a sax player. We both picked up the sax around the same time and really fell in love with jazz. So he also had a huge impact on my path, and is the reason that I got to play with Billy Higgins. He kind of introduced me to Billy. He's the reason I got to play with Snoop Dogg. So, you know, things like that.
So what year did you graduate from Eastman?
99.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about your first bands that you played in out of school, and what do you do when you get a jazz degree, or when you get I guess your degree was a classical saxophone degree, or was it a jazz degree? Were you a dual major or something? How did they do that back then? Do you have a bachelor in music?
Yeah, it evolved into something like, you know, bachelor's in contemporary music or something. It was kind of vague.
Yeah.
You know, out of college, I think for me, I've always been the turtle versus the hare. You know, I just work really hard and I grow slowly. So I was not the guy that got out of college and just had all the gigs lined up, you know. So
where'd you move to from Eastman?
I went back to LA, and I just said, I will take any and all gigs as long as I'm working in music. And I just did everything. I did super random film and commercial work. I did weddings. I did bar mitzvahs. I taught piano lessons to 5-year-olds. You know, I did whatever it took.
Yeah.
You know, and around that time, some of my Eastman compatriots also ended up in LA, and just because we were friends and we were looking to build a scene, we started playing together. And so that's kind of what led to a band that I co-lead called Kneebody.
Yep.
There was a great club that emerged in Santa Monica called the Temple Bar. And, you know, they gave us a regular Monday night. And it was a really cool club because it was primarily they were booking kind of indie singer-songwriter, hip-hop. Like they weren't booking any jazz. It was not a jazz club. It was like a huge JBL system. And it kind of changed how we formed the band. Like I think about, there's this section in that David Byrne book about how music works where he talks about sometimes the space itself is what leads the music. So that space, we were like, okay, it's not going to look cool for us to use music stands. It doesn't make sense for us to play swing. Like, so we, right from the beginning, because of the nature of that space, we said, okay, we're going to write original music. We're going to learn by ear. We're going to take advantage of this system. We're going to play things that are more electroacoustic in nature. Yeah, and then I kept working in LA, and things just kept evolving. I started to meet players out there, players like Taylor Eichste that I mentioned, who went to USC, the great Gerald Clayton, Tigran Hamasyan,
Yeah.
who was also out there. Their work started to pop up in Europe and across the country. I started to tour more and just like very slowly, like a pie graph, whereas like in the beginning, 1% of what I did really fed my soul and felt, authentic. It kept building. And eventually, and then eventually I got here.
I want to talk about making jazz records. And
Yeah.
you made records with Knee Body back in the early 2000s. What is the difference between making a record back then versus making a record now?
Oh, man.
There were still kind of jazz record labels back then, right? Or was it kind of starting to diminish that scene?
Yeah, I feel like I came into, I think about that like, there's that thing that Malcolm Gladwell talks about where sometimes it's just literally the time that you were born, right? And then, so when I came into my professional years was like not the greatest time, like Napster.
That's right, 1999.
Yeah,
right then,
like
Napster.
the internet. So actually like I came into the professional world when all of those sort of sources of power were starting to diminish.
Yes.
The labels, I'm like shocked when I talk to some of my heroes that had deals with, Columbia, Blue Note, all that stuff in the 80s and 90s when they tell me the advances that they got. I mean, it just makes me laugh, because that doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, it was an interesting time. As you know, like the act of making an album, that remains the same, beautiful studio, beautiful gear, like your studio. The economics of it and why we do it, yeah, it's like evolved over the years, Whereas I think during that time, or in the past, like maybe that would be a major source of income, Now I think for a lot of people it's evolved into something that's just a way to build your universe and get more opportunities to play live. Like it's just switched, So, but the act of it itself has stayed the same, I still care very deeply about the engineers I work with, the microphones that are used, how we play, how we put it all together.
You make great sounding records. All the things that we've talked about, I was playing some stuff before we started, and I was playing a song. This is it's called Burning Bright. So this record, tell me about this record. First of all, this is phenomenal sounding. If you guys have headphones, put your headphones on and listen to this. Go listen to this entire record. I mean, it's really great live recording. Talk about this recording.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I just had this crazy idea to try and record this music all in one room, no isolation, which is pretty insane. Like if you end up listening to the album, it's highly technical. It's a strange candidate to use for something where there would be no chances for fixes. But I rented out a completely empty space and we just built a studio in that space. And so we were in a round robin, all of us bleeding into each other's microphones. And it's really a testament to the musicians in that band. Joe Sanders on bass, Michael Mayo on vocals, Nate Wood on drums and engineering, Shy Maestro on piano, Gerald Clayton on Rhodes and piano. We did everything. Everything was 2 to 3 takes. Mm-hmm. And I just really wanted to experience. There's musicians just play differently when they don't have headphones on and they're not isolated in different rooms, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And especially with this music, it's
Was there rehearsals that you did before that to like how much rehearsals would it take to get it together, something like that?
we had one rehearsal.
Okay.
We had 1 6-hour rehearsal to, I mean, I'm sure they practiced the music before then, but yeah, they're crazy,
And those guys can come in and play. They can read charts like that, no problem, right?
Totally, yeah. But that was a very New York kind of experience, like the speed in which musicians can absorb, understand, and execute music is just on another level.
How much are you involved in the? You said Nate did the engineering and mixing and things, but you are involved. You'll sit there and listen when it's your record, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to hear how it goes down, and how much mixing is involved in making a record like that?
I would say more than what is thought of as the typical thing with the jazz album.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of fall somewhere else in terms of that stuff. I love production and the concept of production. I don't advertise it. People don't know this about me, but I've produced around 15 albums. Like, people ask me to produce albums. So I love learning about sound and how all this works, and compression, and with that album, Nate Wood is he's just a remarkable guy. He's like a quadruple threat, plays drums, bass, engineers, masters. And so he's always been a great resource in that way. And I've asked him to mix a lot of my albums. And his aesthetic is just the aesthetic that I like to hear, which is like, it's a jazz album with the kind of pop sensibilities in terms of the sound and clarity and how it's put together.
When I hear that, it's obviously jazz, but the rhythms and things are not like a regular. It's much more modern sounding and things like that. Plus the aesthetic of the actual sound, the way the sound is captured, sounds very modern to me.
Yeah,
it sounds almost like a rock record, like a really well recorded rock album.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, if we're doing it right, as improvisers and composers, we are a reflection of what we like and what we grew up with. So in my case, I grew up with kind of a strange amalgam of music. So I had my opera singing mom, so I'm like hearing Puccini all the time. At that time there was a 24-hour hip hop radio called K-Day. So I was listening to like what I consider like the romantic era of hip hop. Far Side and Tribe Called Quest and Black Star. And then my neighbor was a huge jazzophile, so he was giving me Duke Ellington, Coltrane, Charlie Parker. So that was kind of the mix, and so when I'm writing music, I'm just trying to write like an honest reflection of what I listen to and what I love, and that also includes, EDM and Radiohead and so many other things. Yeah.
There's let's see here. There's another track one. So you play a lot with effects, and when I saw you guys play at the Blue Note, you use a lot of delays, you use harmonizers, all these kind of things, you use distortion. When did you start getting into things like that, and why?
That kind of happened naturally, again, with that band Knee Body that I started. The Rhodes player was already using delay, distortion, the bass player was using octaver, a lot of effects. It happened very organically. I hit a wall at a certain point where I wanted to participate in a different way, and I just couldn't with the acoustic sax. So it started there. I just started using effects pedals. During that time, there weren't a lot of resources. I think the last time there was heavy usage in that way. I would probably be like the fusion era, like the 70s,
Yeah.
you know. But at that moment in time, it just wasn't super common to see horn players with effects. So I was kind of just riding blind and trying things and having a lot of disastrous gigs of, you know, feedback and pedals going wrong. But that's what drew me initially. And then I just fell in love with the world that you could create with it. And as I developed a voice with those instruments, more and more people asked me to play with them because they wanted that sound.
Yeah.
You know, and their bands, like I mentioned, Tigran Hamasyan, for example. I have a memory of him being like, "Yeah, can you get your sax to sound more like a distorted guitar?" You know, I said, "Yes, I can." You know, so it just went from there. And at this point, it's not really like a either or thing for me. It's just literally this. It's just part of who I am and part of the playing. It's an expanded palette.
Do you look at it like a different instrument, or just a kind of a different side of the instrument that you play?
Yeah, I feel like it's just an extension. You know, I wish I played a piano better, and I love that, you know, with piano or guitar, you can really kind of express the full range of harmony and ideas in one instrument. And on sax, it's just more difficult. So things like delay and harmony allow me to do my version of that, you know.
Now, you were playing before we started with using this harmonizer.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about your pedals?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a tiny little looper, a ditto looper. This is kind of my like tour friendly rig here. So it's just tiny and I can carry it around. I've got delay. I've got a Boss delay. This is a volume pedal that lets me swell in the sound. So it's not just like on and off. This is a tiny little ultra drive, overdrive pedal by Moore. This is the Pitchfork. This is like a nice, simple polyphonic pedal. And then this beast, the Eventide H9, this has got just a ton of sounds and you can do really complex harmony with this thing, up to 4 voices, and you can move things around in a completely different way. This one, maybe I'll play a little bit of this if I play like, this is the one that reminds me the most of like maybe what someone could do on a iwi, you know.
Explain what an iwi is.
Iwi, electric woodwind instrument. People like Bob Menser and Michael Brecker made it famous. You know, it's essentially a wind-triggered MIDI controller where you can just access endless sounds. For me, I don't know why, but I just never wanted to go down that route. So this is...
Because they look weird.
Because they look weird. Yeah. And
Well,
maybe,
you don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
They didn't have these kind of pedals really in this way back when those guys were doing that back in the
totally,
you know, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah, and there's actually great iwi players even today that are doing new things, but I just wanted to try and get to that sound in a more, let's say, analog way, you know, so that's how I ended up here.
Why don't you play something for us?
Yeah, let's go to outer space.
Beautiful. That's
Thanks,
great,
Rick.
man.
Thank you.
Okay, so what are these things doing there? Obviously you have the ditto looper that creates the initial
Yeah.
couple passes, right, where you start doing layering. But then
Yeah.
you have a pitch shift, and you have the H9. And is the H9 doing like a harmonizing at the same time, or no?
Yeah, it just depends. Like these are both basically, I'm using both of these as harmonizers, but just in a different way. You know, the pitchfork, it's just more limited. And it has a kind of a different sound. You know, the way it makes the sound. I think it's based on like a sine wave or something. So it's not literally sampling the sax's sound.
Right.
And then the H9, I think it literally is sampling the sound, so it has a much richer, right?
Yes.
And it's really interesting. I love using pedals in ways maybe where in ways where they weren't supposed to be used, right? So in the case of this one, I've got this pedal set to a key. It's like in the key of D flat concert. But if I just literally manipulate the pitch outside of the key, it'll track in different ways, and so in the case of this one, it'll kind of go to C. So even though I don't think they intended it that way, I can kind of move through keys.
Wow.
Yeah, just visit some other worlds.
That's so cool.
Thanks.
And then it makes it where you don't need an accompanist. You can just play on your own.
Yeah, you know, yeah, exactly. It just kind of builds that out. It takes time to build these loops, you know, but yeah, it offers more options.
I want to talk about vocabulary and kind of what saxophonist, you're a jazz musician, you're an improviser. You obviously have a bebop vocabulary. In addition to a vocabulary, like a lot of the things that you were playing there are not really bebop sounding lines. It's a language that has kind of specific structure to the lines. Can you explain like what bebop language is versus more kind of modern
I mean,
improvisation?
I kind of think of bebop language as like Bach, you know, and then modern language is, I don't know who modern language would be. It would be later, you know, it could be Prokofiev or something, you know, but yeah, I mean, the linear structure of bebop is very specific. It's very clear. It's literally, I think, some of the most challenging. It's one of the most challenging ways to improvise, and there's people out there that do it on a level that's frightening, you know. So yeah, but it's more based on outlining chords in a very clear, logical way that to me connects more to a traditional kind of harmony. And then whatever this thing we call modern harmony, it breaks away from that. It's still adhering to the same rules. I think for most improvisers, and I feel like you have this philosophy too, which is like genres and old and new and all that stuff. It kind of all disappears at a certain point, right? You know, you were playing me, you know, some music by Handel yesterday, and so you were like, check out these changes, and it's really true. You know, it's like the best music and the best language is kind of timeless and it's genreless. You know, so I don't think about anymore how I ended up here. You know, but I deeply respect the whole lineage of this music and kind of understand that I'm on this path where there's information before me and there's information ahead of me. So I'm just trying to learn all of it.
Where would you say your earliest influences, and I don't mean from linear, like when you started, but when you go back to study players, when you were, you know, in college and things like that, and you're going back to study people, the John Coltrane's, the Mike Breckers, whoever, but who is it before that, Charlie Parker? Are there people even pre-Charlie Parker Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins. Did you listen to players like that?
Yeah.
Sonny Stitt?
I actually, I really, he's like a top 3 for me. I actually really love Django Reinhardt.
Okay.
So I don't know. In terms of like older players, like I remember being obsessed with him. I've transcribed a lot of his solos. I just think he's sort of this magical, mysterious musician that was way, way, way ahead of his time. So he was a big influence. Definitely Coltrane, like, and that kind of happened and I wouldn't say by accident, but yeah, I think I was 12 and I said my neighbor, he gave me some music. So like the albums that just completely changed my life, he had like a best of John Coltrane album that had all the hits like Naima and
The hits.
yeah, you know.
Well, they were hits.
Yeah, and he also gave me some Charlie Mingus. Like I remember there was an album called The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, and at that time, I guess, you know, my brain, as you said, the fluid part of my cortex was wide open, and I remember playing those albums. That's how I would go to sleep. I would put the album on and turn out the lights and then just like swim in that universe. I really didn't understand what it was, but it held a power for me.
And what do you practice now?
What do I practice now?
Because and the reason I ask this is that when you play an instrument that you have an embouchure for, you actually have to keep it up. You have to kind of keep playing to keep your embouchure, the lip muscles in shape. If you play trumpet, you play trombone, whatever you play saxophone, bassoon.
Yes.
What do you practice when you do that? Do you do maintenance stuff, or you working on new ideas and writing? How much time do you spend on the piano writing, things like that? Tell me about your kind of what you work on.
I mean, as best I can, I'm trying to sort of keep up the spirit of a music school. It's like my own little personal music school. So I'm still just like working on let's call them the food groups of music, you know? So I'm still working on sound, which in the case of the saxophone means like long tones. I'm working on language, you know, and which in my case is like I love to take different lines and patterns and move them through the horn in different ways, whether it be chromatically or through, you know, the circle of fourths or even things outside of that. I'm always working on time, different kind of challenging metronomic exercises or without the metronome. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to learn new songs. So I'm, you know, transcribing a lot, whether it be solos or you know, tunes that I have yet to learn.
What's a new tune that you've learned? Is there anything that comes to mind that you've worked on lately?
Yeah, Olha Maria by Jobim, which is just a gorgeous, complex tune that I wish I wrote. It's one of those tunes. It's like
There's a lot of Jobim songs like that.
Yeah, I know. It's like, you know, there's tunes like him, you know. It's like if I just wrote one song like that, I think I'd be cool, you know. So, so basically I'm just trying to stay swim in the music world at all times, you know, and and just keep composing. So my average day when I'm not on tour, it's like 6 to 8 hours of that, just in my studio, working, pushing forward.
Okay, you know? What's your studio? Do you work with a DAW, or are you in Logic or Pro Tools or what?
My studio is a tiny little thing in Brooklyn, and it's got, you know, a Gretsch kit and a Fender Rhodes and I've got like a 4-channel Apogee kind of Pro Tools setup, and I could do remote recordings from there, and that's where I just kind of go into the cave and work on stuff, you know. I think we were talking about this, like, I think all of my heroes of music, I've noticed that they all share this one thing, which is they never stop being curious. They never arrive, you know. It's amazing to me, you know, like they're absolute heroes of mine, and they're like, I'll talk to someone and they'll go, well, how are you doing that? Like, what do you know, that they're still curious, they're still pushing forward, which I think is like why I love music in general, which is it's just like it's a life path that forces you to just keep growing, keep being curious, keep discovering new things, you know. So that's what I'm, in a nutshell, technically, that's what I'm just trying to do each day, you know.
When you're writing for an album, do you just write a bunch of songs and then you're like, okay, I have enough songs for a record? Or do you write things that are kind of in a specific, like the Seasons record, you had a concept for it. Now you just had a concept for, I'm going to write 12 12 tunes, and I'm going to call one each one after a month, or did you have a particular sound because you had a particular group of people together?
That one actually came from a really specific source, which is my wife introduced me to a series of piano sonatas that Tchaikovsky wrote called The Seasons, 12 pieces for the 12 months. It's mid 1800s. But what was intriguing about it was, at the time, the way that you got each new piece was that you had to subscribe to a music magazine. And each month, you would get a new composition from Tchaikovsky for each month, which I was like, oh, that's so cool that he was doing that even back then. And, it goes
Very
without...
social media of him.
Exactly. And I just thought, like, what would be the modern equivalent of that through the lens of what I do? So then that's how it kind of took shape. So I said, okay, I'm gonna pick 12 musicians that I greatly admire, great improvisers. I'm gonna write pieces dedicated to each one for each month. I'm gonna make videos. I'm gonna put this online once a month. We were talking about that. That was back in 2015. And at that time, it's like funny to think about that. That was like kind of an interesting thing to do
It's
back
like early
then.
YouTube.
Yeah. But yeah, so in the case of that particular album, there was a concept behind it. And then in terms of writing, Duke Ellington talks about this a lot. He always wrote for his players, and I'm very much a writer like that. Like I imagine the musician, I imagine their strengths, I imagine the color of their personality, and then I write to that. So in the case of that specific album, all of the guests are heroes of mine, and it was just a joy to write for each one. Julian Lodge, who you've had on your channel, other people, Ambrose Akinmusiri, sax heroes of mine, Joshua Redman, Mark Turner, on and on and on.
I had told you the story about the song March. I want to play a little bit of that here. So when it goes to that A major chord there, and it's like the piano is playing like an A sus2. It's like A B.
Yeah.
E, I think, right? Is it?
Yeah.
So I was listening to that in the car. I was coming back from Taekwondo with my daughter Layla. She was thinking, and so we're listening to this, and I texted you after this, and so Layla's listening to this, and all of a sudden it gets in that da 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 da, and then all of a sudden she picks up my phone. And she goes, I thought this was Keith Jarrett. I thought this was Belonging. What? Ben Wendel.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it does. It kind of has like a Keith vibe to it. And then I texted you that
Totally.
that the Belonging about the Belonging record. There's a specific beautiful language with these things. You use a lot of triadic things and these add nines, things like that. That is more out of, to me, it's like the ECM sound. And even though this doesn't sound like necessarily like an ECM record, but it's just a vocabulary. And I was joking about this that like major chords are jazz kryptonite.
Yeah.
Right. It almost sounds like folk music. And I think when I hear Charlie Hayden, when I hear Keith Jarrett, when I hear Pat Metheny, and that they have that Midwestern kind of hymn-like music, and it has that beauty. It evokes something to me of expanse and melodicism.
Someone who's a huge influence for me, even the way I play vibrato and use effects, is Bill Frisell, and he's another one that can make a triad just sound like
yes,
$1 million, you know. So he, and Charlie. I remember hearing stories about the way that Charlie liked piano players to comp behind him, and mostly he just said, play triads.
Yeah,
you know, stay out of my way.
Right.
You know, so that had a big impact on me, hearing those stories and thinking about that. Like, how do you pull complexity out of less notes? You know, how do you do that? You know, how do you make a lot out of a little? You know, so I do think about that a lot. A thing that I do a lot, and you heard it in this piece, is I do love like inversions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just love that sound. You know, like an A over C sharp with a B in there, that kind of sound. I feel like that's a way to give you that triadic feel, but just maybe one more little dimension, let's say. Yeah.
Are things like this that are really kind of specific to the piano, so like on this record?
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of these things you wrote with the piano, or that you came up with the piano. Is that would that be fair to say?
Yeah, this one, this fits really nicely on the piano. Ironically, this started on the bassoon,
Okay.
which is the original duet that I wrote this for was bassoon and acoustic bass. Mm-hmm. A great bassist named Matt Brewer. And so that left-hand line is actually, I was just trying to write something that laid nicely on the bassoon, which is a horribly difficult instrument.
Wait, Tug, I want to talk
no one
about
should
this.
play.
Okay, so the bassoon is a double reed instrument, the oboe bassoon.
Yeah.
Why are these so difficult to play?
You know, I mean, the bassoon, you know, God, it just never got modernized in a way. I don't even know if you could modernize it, but you know, just to give you an idea, like just the left thumb has 9 buttons to navigate. You know, it's just a very complex instrument. And actually, this is a great,
beautiful instrument.
I love that instrument.
But it's such a
yeah, it's a beast.
It is.
And it's interesting to be, you know, I'm probably I'm a part of a very small group of people that improvise on the bassoon. I want to give a shout out to who I think is the guy. It's the guy named Paul Hansen, who plays with Bella Fleck and a lot of other people. To me, he's the number one guy on shredding on bassoon and improvising and whatnot. But yeah, so you know, that particular piece, I was trying to find something that laid well, but then it does really work well as a piano sustained thing. So.
And your bassoon playing, how often you play your bassoon?
Not a ton. Like I took it on a few tours and then my back hurt afterwards. So, you know, I just said, okay. So I incorporate it into a lot of my albums. I love that sound, like the density of stacked bassoons. 2 albums ago, I did a project called All One, where I basically built these like 30-piece woodwind orchestras with overdubbing. So I'm playing all of the bassoons, all of the saxes, and then I would invite a guest. And so that was sort of like the ultimate expression of how I use that sound, how I love that sound. Yeah.
You did a record, this tune, Proof, which you played on the Japan. So This is from this is live. This is Village Vanguard. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about the Village Vanguard for people that don't know
Yeah.
about that club. It's a legendary jazz club in New York City.
Yeah.
And it holds about 100 people. Not even.
Yeah, a little over, maybe 100, 120, I would say. Yeah.
I've been to the Vanguard many times. The last time I went there was Kurt Rosenwinkel was playing. And it was probably about 3 years ago. And I got out of my cab and I stepped into a puddle of slush. And my foot
very New York.
completely submerged.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
And I was sitting there with like a wet shoe and everything. It was like really very comfortable.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But I've seen some amazing shows at the Vanguard. So
Yeah.
what are the logistics of recording for something like that?
Well,
How do you do that?
the Vanguard is really like, it is Mecca. It is the place. It's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, continuously run jazz club in the world.
Yep.
I don't even know how many albums have been recorded there, but basically every giant of this music has played there and infused their energy into the walls of that space. So when you play there, you really do feel like you're on hallowed ground. And logistically, it's actually kind of complex because the stage is on one end and the only place to fit the recording gear is kind of in the backstage kitchen area.
Yeah.
So I have to give kudos to Chris Allen, the engineer that recorded and mixed this. He found a way to really capture the sound. But yeah, it's really like every young sax player's dream is to not only to play there, but to be able to record there. And I pinch myself that I get to do that. It's just a deep, deep honor.
When I interviewed Gary Burton back in 2018, I had said to him, he had retired from playing.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you decide to retire? He's like, well, I didn't want to be that guy that couldn't make it up the stairs at the Village Vanguard. and I was like, yeah, those are kind of steep stairs there. And I was like, I thought that was like a very specific thing.
Man, you reminded me of a story. So I did a week there once, and I put together a really fun band, and it included Larry Goldings. Mm-hmm. And I had this dream of having Larry play organ, and I didn't really think about it much. And then it was time to think about the logistics of getting a B3 down there.
God.
Needless to say, Larry played piano on that week and a little bit of Rhodes, but basically they started telling me like these horror stories of getting this, multi-100-pound instrument down those stairs.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that's why you don't see organ trios play there very often. Yeah.
Tell me about the logistics of, I saw you in Japan. How do you get booked?
Yeah.
You have an agent over there?
Yeah, I have, I have the pretty typical setup. I have booking agencies in North America and worldwide, and they go out for work for me, which I'm very grateful for. And then sometimes people reach out to. Blue Note, I played there a few times now. They reached out, and it's amazing to play there. They do it right out there.
The sound at the Blue Note there in Tokyo is phenomenal. It sounded great. The room's amazing.
It's incredible. If you speak to any musician, it's like Japan is really at the very top. They take it so seriously. You show up, everything is exactly where it needs to be. They're just on it.
Taylor and Justin were facing each other.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't seen any shows in that room other than your show, but is that typically the piano will face the drummer like that? Is that kind of the normal setup?
Yeah, I think so.
For that room?
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty big stage.
Yeah.
So they can do that. Yeah. Totally.
And how well can you hear yourself on stage?
Very well. Yeah. With this kind of music, it's like, we were talking about Keith Jarrett. I'm always like, when you see that footage of that trio playing and they're like miles apart.
They're so far apart.
I don't know how they did it. For me, I just love the feeling of being close enough that you can literally feel the sound waves of the instrument. We're trying to like take four people and turn into this one amorphous entity, and I don't know. So far, that's how I like to do it. And that's how it was set up in Tokyo. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about social media.
Okay.
And
Oh,
what
God.
you do as a jazz musician, because I when I have jazz players on here, I ask them about that. It's pretty much how people promote themselves nowadays. Is
Yeah.
that for people to know where you're going to be playing? How do people know where you're going to be? I mean, how do you use social media? Do you use it in that way to say, hey, I'm going to be playing in Europe here. I'm going to be in Oslo. I'm going to be in Tokyo or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, I do everything and all things that are known as the best practices in this moment, which, as you know, are always subject to change. But yeah, I use those platforms in an effort to cut through the noise and reach people. You have an insane amount of reach. For me, my goals, let's say, are a little more conservative in the sense that I would be very happy to just have a cut of the pie that just represents like my tribe, like the people that just really enjoy my music and want to come to shows. And when you think from those terms, you don't need that many people if they show up, if they want to, get your albums and, so I'm just trying to build that basically as authentically as I can through these crazy platforms. And, as I'm sure I mean, it's a conversation that's constantly happening between musicians. And I always get the feeling like it's something that nobody 100% knows the answer to, but we're just trying our best. But we were talking about yesterday, which to me, one thing that kind of like gives me a little bit of, I don't know if hope is the right word, but gives me permission, let's say, to use this technology and feel okay about it is that, literally some of the heroes of this music, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, they're using it. And they're using it in really interesting ways, and you get kind of insight into their lives. And so at least they're sort of answering that question of, that question of like, what do people do in the time that they're living in to promote their art, And so it's nice to see that generation that came before all of this madness.
Well, Ron, not to interrupt, but Ron
Please.
is one of the best posters on, I mean, really, on Instagram. He's had like another career since 2020 of posting, and he's continued to do it, and he's great at it. His social media presence is fantastic.
Yeah, and I really appreciate him too because he really shares his wisdom. He does these like monthly Zooms that you can just jump in on. You can ask him questions about his legacy. Ultimately, as you've said before, and we know, ultimately it's the music that leads. But how do you get heard? Essentially, so the culture keeps changing and how we do this keeps changing. I'm sure if we speak even 5 years from now, it's going to be a different conversation, So, just like everybody else, I'm navigating it as best as I can.
I want to play you a couple things. This is McCoy Tyner. It's actually a record we were talking about last night. And to me, the ensemble playing on this tune is amazing. But I want to get your thoughts. This is Off the Real McCoy, which came out in 1967. So it's a McCoy Tyner on piano, Elvin Jones on the drums, Ron Carter on the bass. Since you said Ron, I just like, oh. And then Joe Henderson on the sax. Okay, so this is Passion Dance.
Just right away. Pick right away.
Okay, I'm going to stop it before Joe's solo here.
Okay.
So, what are your impressions when you hear that?
I mean, why even try after that? You know, it's my impression. Yeah, I mean,
What is great about that? What do you think? I mean, is it? Give me your.
It's interesting. It's so hard to explain or encapsulate what makes that great. In a way, like, you know, that year I got to play with Billy Higgins, playing with that beat and hearing how he played, and playing with someone that comes directly from that experience and the lineage. Like suddenly a light bulb went off, you know, and there's just so many things about it. One thing that I think about a lot, outside of the fact that these are all the giants of this music, is just how much they were playing, like literally how much they were playing. You know, it's different now, you know, and there's just there's an energy to that. There's an energy to having a life where you're probably playing like 6 nights out of the week, 2 to 3 sets. You know, you're just going to get to levels upon levels upon levels. And the moment Elvin plays the beginning of that track, the immediacy is just insane. And it really goes beyond, there's just an untranscribable element to how their beat feels, how they're playing together, just the communication, what they're communicating. So, you know, you can get into the technical aspects, but the thing that actually makes that so great is honestly something that's kind of very difficult to pin down. You know, I had the honor of meeting Joe Henderson a few times. He actually came to Eastman. He was a guest there, and he was very soft-spoken. He's like a top 3 for me. I mean, he's just
Love Joe Henderson.
Just such a ridiculous musician, you know, and he's like such a good example of that too when he plays, you know, like the fluidness and how he communicates. You know, another album that I love that also has Ron Carter, it's the State of the Tenor, like it's live at the Village Vanguard with Al Foster and Ron and Joe. And so I'm very grateful that I had an opportunity to ask all 3 of them what that experience was like. It was very interesting to even hear their perspectives on that, you know. So I wonder when you hear an album like this, what was going on at that time? Because this might have been just like another day, you know, like, you know what I mean? A lot of these times it was just like, yeah, in and out, you know, but they were on such a level that they could just get there, the immediacy, you know, so.
I wanted to play some of Joe's solo here,
Oh, God,
though.
please, yeah. Man.
Joe has such, to me, that's such a vocal style, and it's so original. His tone, his lines.
Yeah.
Tell me about what, you're the saxophonist. I mean, why is his sound so original?
I mean, you'd have to ask him. It's a combination of so many things, but he had a really, well, this is so nerdy and technical. So
That's what I want to hear.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he had a really interesting setup. He mostly played a Mark VI, which is kind of like.
Explain that.
Okay, so a Mark VI made by the Selmer Company. This is like, let's say it's like one of the Stradivari of saxophones, and that's normal. Like a lot of the greats played either a Mark VI or something called a super balanced action, like Coltrane, Wayne Shorter. But yeah, Joe played on kind of a classical, what would be deemed a classical mouthpiece, kind of a small mouthpiece, not a big sound. He didn't have a big sound.
He didn't. No.
No. But it sounds huge on recordings.
Yeah.
So there's something just so like tender about his sound, and at the same time he can access this other energy that's just absolutely incredible. So there's that. There's the way he articulates when he goes, like everything is so personal with him, and then his technique is so incredible. Like what I hear when I hear him play is someone that can play so much and is pushing himself right to the cliff. He's really he is playing what he hears in his head in that moment, like true improvisation, not prepared. And that's not easy to do. So all of those melodic lines you were singing along to, it's just remarkable. It's a testament to how far he got. And he makes it sound effortless.
Yeah.
But you have no idea how hard it is to do what he's doing, which is kind of part of the genius of it. You have no idea how hard it is. He makes it sound easy in a way. But in there also, there's a struggle in there that's also so compelling. You feel the immediacy of it. You feel the risk of it. And it's all the things that I love in music. It's just all there.
I want to play one other thing here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The first chord. I know exactly what you're doing.
Okay, so that's Michael Brecker, Klaus Ogerman, Cityscape. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, man, so iconic. That album, I wore that album out. Yeah, I mean, first, Klaus Ogerman, just like orchestrator of the gods, everything he ever touched, voicings, just everything about it. So already you're already starting there, And then you add Michael Brecker, one of the greatest of all time. And Michael, Michael's so interesting too, because I kind of think of him as one of the let's say the early genre breakers in a way, right? He, deeply in love and passionate about what we call jazz, but then was just, playing with Joni Mitchell, playing with Paul Simon. Also had a background where he got lessons with a guy named Joe Allard, who was the classical clarinetist, so you can hear all of that in his playing. So he's like a perfect candidate to play this music and to play with an orchestra. And you just put that together, it's so powerful. And really speaks to me.
Incredibly pure tone on this recording too. I mean, really appropriate with the orchestra.
Yeah.
What kind of sax is he playing there?
He's playing a Mark VI. He moved around on gear quite a bit. Michael, so I've been extremely lucky to become friends with Randy Brecker and Susan Brecker, his wife. And so I kind of learned more about who Michael was as a musician. So first of all, it obviously goes without saying, if you listen to him play, he was an insane practicer, deeply curious, was always pushing himself, but also really had a lot of doubts and kind of dealt with that through his whole life, and that can manifest in a lot of different ways. Susan told me very funny stories about him, switching gear at the very last second, and him, oh no, like she told me a story about him finding this other horn and him saying, this is it, I found the one, and going to a gig in Denver and then calling her and saying, this is not it. And then he flew his friend out to bring him his other horn, So his main horn for most of what we know Michael for was this Mark VI, 80,000 serial range. Like it's that the serial range of that horn, because of Michael, is like a coveted range.
Okay.
Even though, like, let's get real, it's Michael, but it is an interesting range of the horn, and he had a silver neck that came from a different horn. And
how does that influence the sound?
I try and stay on the sidelines when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
People will say that different metals affect the sound in different ways.
What do you think?
Can I plead the fifth? I think there's a very strong psychosomatic element to it. I'll give you an example. There's a great neck maker in New York. I play one of his necks, the great Kim Bach.
Wait, what is the neck here?
Sorry, this is the neck of the horn.
Okay.
So the trinity, if you will, when we talk about the sound, is like most people will say, like the bulk of your sound comes from the mouthpiece.
Yep.
And then the next most important part is the neck. And then the body is maybe the least important. We can argue percentages, but basically this part right here is critical. And so you change the neck, you change a lot about the horn. So Michael eventually settled on a silver neck that he really loved. And, but just to give you an example, so this neck is handmade. And I remember trying out different necks and kind of going, oh, but I like this one because of this, and I like this one because, and they were all different. One was made of copper.
How long do you play on it when you're trying it out?
I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
When you're starting, if you've got like 20 necks in front of you.
Okay.
And
you just keep putting them on the bodies.
Yeah, and you try and you just react, But then Kim did something that's why I'm having trouble answering your question, because he did something that changed it for me. He said, because I was like, oh, but that copper one, oh, but that brass one. He said, let's try something. He's like, I want you to just close your eyes, and I'm going to keep swapping out the necks, and I want you to tell me which one is which.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually I just couldn't tell. And he said the eyes, your eyes have a huge influence on how something sounds if you're in a wood room versus a concrete room. All these things, So I don't know is the answer, but I do know that in the case of Michael, he was a master saxophonist and musician with his technique and everything. So I do know that his horn was, the result of all of that training and all of that searching. And I can guarantee you it was an amazing horn for whatever reason, silver or no silver. As long as we're talking about
Talk about the Bulgarian project.
Cool. So this is something I'm going to premiere the music soon, and I hope to record it. But yeah, just talking about Michael. Yeah, so Susan and Randy Brecker, they came to me a few years ago with this story that I hadn't heard about, which is basically in the later years of Michael's life, he became completely obsessed with Bulgarian folk music. Just an example of how he never stopped pushing himself. Because you could spend your entire life trying to learn Bulgarian folk music and fail. It's some of the most complex, challenging music out there. Right around the time that he was recording, basically doing his final album, Pilgrimage, he was writing this other body of work, which was directly inspired by this folkloric music, but then kind of put through the prism of his writing. And sadly, he didn't finish it, as you well know. So many years later, yeah, Susan and Randy came to me and they kind of told me this story, and they said, we've got these, we call them seeds. We've got these little 1-minute demos that he made in his studio, and would you be open to maybe doing something with them, completing this work? And so already that's a very heavy, very intimidating honor. So it took me a second to even decide if I wanted to do it, but I listened to the demos, and they're so amazing. I mean, they're so tiny. They're just these little minute things, but there's so much information in them, and also they just show this completely new path that Michael was on. And so it just felt like this music needs to get out there. It's sort of it's a message in a bottle, and it's a message to musicians, just keep going, keep going. This guy who knows what he would have done if he kept going. So anyway, it's been a really interesting experience. Like, we've been talking a lot about composition. This has been the most challenging thing I've ever done, because they gave me these seeds which are incomplete, but have real strong DNA to them. So there's that. There's the very deep history and tradition of folkloric music from Bulgaria, and then they're asking me to complete it. So I went and had lessons and hangs with a violinist named Encho Todorov that was giving Michael lessons, was teaching him all of these different dances, the Rachenitsa, the Daichovo, all these things. And he gave me a lot of insight into where all this music came from. And, I was even asking him, because I said, this tune, is this like a standard? Is this a standard? What is this? And he said, it was really interesting. He said, oh, yeah, that's a well-known, this one, no. This is just like a phrase that we know. This is kind of part of the lexicon of this music. Anyway, so yeah, I finally have finished that music, and I'm going to be giving it a test run soon. And yeah, I'm just really excited to eventually share it, because I think it's an amazing story, and it's just amazing to hear where he was headed. And for me, it's been such an amazing, different kind of learning experience, to kind of face a giant, to face a giant.
Get in his headspace and
yeah,
and collaborate with him, basically.
In a way, yeah. But also find a way to maintain my identity in doing it and honoring him. And God bless Randy and Susan, because they said that right from the beginning. They said, we're not looking for someone to sound like Michael. That's not what we want. We want you to do what you do, but we feel like you're the right fit for this, and so it's actually been an amazing growing experience learning about this musician who was definitely one of my heroes, and it's pushed me a lot.
When you're doing a project like that, or any of your records,
yeah,
how do you know when you're going to make a record?
I mean, man, you were talking about social media. I think that's really interesting too, how it's affected thoughts on how do you even share your music, and how do you share your art, and
and how do you share your art?
Right. Well, okay. In my case, just logistically, energetically, because I'm a working touring musician, I sort of only have so much time. So in an ideal world, I'm releasing something like an album a year.
Okay.
If I could release more, maybe I would. So that's what I aim for. But You know, I mean, so the next thing, so for example, like the next album I'm going to release, I'm really proud of it. It's very different. It's going to be it's a project called Barcode, which is me with my effects, surrounded by four of the best jazz vibraphonists on the scene now, playing vibraphone, marimba, chromatic balafone. They use effects, so it's just like this totally outside of my comfort zone experience that actually came through a commission by a great presenter in New York called the Jazz Gallery. So, but yeah, that's what I'm aiming for, you know, something like that. I always have more ideas and projects than I can keep up with.
And how many shows do you typically play a year?
I don't know. I'd have to count it up. Whatever it is, I am convinced it's still not as many as how many shows Ron Carter was playing in the 60s.
Probably is playing still, right?
It's still, yeah, you know, but yeah, a lot, you know, a lot of traveling, a lot of playing around.
Where do you play in the United States? Have you ever played Atlanta? Ever played a gig here?
Yeah, well, we were talking about that. The last time I played here was with the great Terrence Blanchard.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm going to say it wrong again. Spivey or Spivey?
Spivey Hall.
Spivey
in
Hall.
Athens, not yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Adjacent.
Here, yes.
Yeah. I mean, typically, for sure, you play the primary and secondary markets. So, you know, LA, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, New Orleans, you know, on and on. It's maybe less common to play like the tertiary type markets, like the smaller places. Touring in the States it kind of feels a little more patchworky, if you will. Like when you tour in Europe, it's just...
So when you tour Europe, like
Yeah.
where are the places that you'll play?
You'll play all of the major cities in all of the countries, basically. And it's much easier. You know, we're talking 1 to 2 hour flights, a lot of train options. It's much easier to build a tour geographically in that country. And in the States, it's like you have to go by region, you know, so it's always changing, you know, but...
And typically, if you're going over to Europe to tour, how long will the tour be?
You know, depends. In my case, a lot of them sort of end up around the 2 to 3 week mark, you know. They can be longer, they can be shorter. Yeah, it always varies.
And then festivals?
Festivals, yeah. There's certain times of the year.
Which are when?
Definitely the summer.
Yeah.
And then usually there's sort of these periods in the fall and spring where a lot of festivals pop up.
What are the big festivals to play? Like, what are the ones that you will typically play?
I mean, the really big ones out in Europe would be like the North Sea Jazz Festival. In North America, Montreal Jazz Fest is a big one. This is where you're talking about just multi-day, you know, 100,000 people kind of situation. There's many more, you know, but there's a lot of jazz festivals in the world. Yeah, it's nice to see, you know, because we're always wondering, where is this all going? You know, where is this all going with live music and opportunities to play this music? And I'm pleasantly surprised at how there's always new emerging venues, new festivals, new bookers, you know, so.
Ben, can you do circular breathing? I had a buddy of mine that I played with back in Rochester named Terrence Bruce. This is way back in the 80s, and Terrence played in a band called Cabo Frio from Rochester.
Okay.
And Terrence was probably, 6'5", 280 pounds or something, that massive dude. And he could circular breathe for, he could just go on. He could do multiple, he'd have 3 horns. He could do it like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Can you do circular breathing?
I can. And you know, actually,
Explain what circular breathing is.
Okay, so basically you are inhaling through your nose and pushing air out of your mouth at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to, it's kind of like, you know, patting your head, rubbing your belly. It's a very weird sensation, but in that brief moment where you push the air out of your mouth and you inhale in your nose, it's like a second, and you can sustain the note, and you can just repeat that for as long as you want. So do you have to have tension in your like? Yes. How's it? Absolutely. Yeah. You're forcing the air out while you're taking a breath in. That's right. Yeah. I've never seen anyone do it up close. Well, okay, I'll show you. Okay. First, I'll just show you the baby version. Okay. So it's like. That's me doing it right now. You
Yep.
can kind of see the chipmunk cheeks.
Yep.
So that's like the air that kind of, I learned to do it. Actually, my reason I learned how to do this was when I was 19, I had a series of lung collapses. And when I was recovering, my lungs were like it was weird. I didn't have all my air capacity. So I literally learned how to circular breathe so I could just finish phrases as I was playing. And then I healed, and then it was like, oh, well, I can do this, So I actually have I have a tune from my first album called Breath, where I'm circular breathing the whole melody. And then I have a tune called Still Play, which I usually do like an introduction to, and like I use a lot of circular breathing, so it sounds like this, like. And I just keep going,
How much air pressure is in there? Because is it a weird feeling when you're blowing out and inhaling? Like, how do you even get used to that?
I love being one of the first horn players on your chest. This is great. You always have like guitar playing down. It has to be enough air to get that piece of bamboo to vibrate. So it's like blowing out a candle, let's say, rough equivalent.
Okay.
It goes up and down. It's like the air hose at a gas station. You know what I mean? Sometimes you need a lot of force. Sometimes it can be very, very soft. So.
That's cool.
Cool.
Well, Ben, I really appreciate you coming down and hanging out. It's been amazing.
Man, thank you so much, Rick. Yeah, total honor, man. Thank you.
Same. It was so great to run into you in Tokyo and see you play there. That was such a random thing, but I knew it was meant to be, and I was like, I need to have Ben come down and hang out.
Thank you, man.
Really appreciate it.